Thank you, Dr. Nishino. Next, Dr. Kaoru KITAJIMA, Professor of Graduate School of Agriculture, will deliver a lecture whose title is Forests and Sustainable Development Goals. Dr. Kaoru KITAJIMA is a professor at Kyoto University's Graduate School of Agriculture. As a forest ecologist, she has about 40 years of research experience in tropical America, Asia, and Africa in wide-ranging topics including tree seedling regeneration, tree responses to climate factors and soil environment, plant microbial interactions, and ecology of exotic invasive plants. She has a PhD in plant biology from the University of Illinois, USA, and worked at the University of Florida and some other American universities. She is currently a member of the Science Council of Japan and has contributed to various international organizations. Now let's listen to her lecture. Dr. KITAJIMA, please.
My name is Kaoru KITAJIMA. I'm a professor at the Graduate School of Agriculture in the Division of Forest and Biomaterial Science. So my unit has something to do with forests, so I'm going to tell you about why forests are important in Sustainable Development Goals. And many of you have heard of Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them. And these were adopted in 2015 by the United Nations as part of their 2013 agenda. The idea is all of these are important issues that cannot be solved in isolation from others. And more recently, United Nations has launched Decade on Ecosystem Restoration to counter, to stop triple environmental emergency. Do you know what make up the triple environmental emergency? I'm going to show you one in each of these three boxes. Well, quickly, the answer is biodiversity loss, climate disruption, and escalating pollution. In terms of biodiversity loss, there is a dangerous, unprecedented rate of species extinction, loss of biodiversity going. So in the most recent assessment of IPBES, Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Function, they say that there is a strong scientific evidence that 1 million or more species are threatened to go extinct. And that is not just some wild animals you never heard the name of going extinct, because it has some direct relevance to our lives, including the risk of emerging disease, such as Ebola, SARS, Lassa fever, and COVID-19, that many of you are struggling right now. Let me show you a short video from UNEP. You don't hear the sound, which is okay, but read the caption. Zoonotic diseases are the diseases transmitted from wild animals to humans because people destroy forests. When the habitats are lost to wild animals and wild animals become close contact with people, including animals like pigs and chickens, there is a greater risk of dangerous virus and bacteria jumping from wild animals to domesticated animals, then to humans. This is a serious issue that really are causing huge economic loss, not to mention lives of millions of people in the world right now. How do we stop another COVID-19 pandemic? For that, we must protect forests and restore the balance, nature's balance, especially in tropical forests. But how do we do it? Why are forests lost in the world? We'll come back to that. So I'll briefly mention the third point, escalating pollution. 19 million premature deaths are happening because of pollution of land, fresh water, and more recently you hear more and more about ocean pollution by microplastic. But these biodiversity loss and pollution issues are linked to also climate disruption. IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, releases scientific reports and updates every 5 years. Global temperature is rising at much faster rates than previously predicted, especially on land, because of human activities. And the climate change is already causing severe disruption to weather patterns, causing land degradation, loss of biodiversity through flooding, drought, all sorts of weird weather patterns happening. And this is something I call negative spiral between climate change and land degradation. What do I mean? Non-sustainable land use by people, like cutting tropical forests, are causing land degradation. Forests may be turned into cropland to cultivate maize for 2-3 years, but then it becomes degraded, losing the function to produce food and protect biodiversity and supply clean water. Not only that, change of land surface characteristics cause further climate warming and cause severe weather events like I mentioned. So things get worse and worse. So no wonder recently young people who worry about the future of the planet for your generation, the people who are listening today, to be worried and asking us grown-ups to do something about it. Here is Greta Thunberg, who started climate strike. She started to do this as a 16-year-old girl in Sweden, but she ignited huge changes in the awareness of climate change. So you must be hearing more about climate change too. So coming back to forests, forests are particularly important for conservation of biodiversity and reducing climate change impacts. Why? These are some of the key reasons. Forests are home to more than 80% of all the living things, plants, animals, insects on land. Forests are the most cost-effective way to fight climate change. Forest-based climate change mitigation and adaptation, if fully implemented, could reduce greenhouse gas emission by 15 gigatons of carbon dioxide. That's a huge number. But that's what we need in order to curb the climate warming within plus 2 degrees from the beginning of Industrial Revolution 200 years ago. So how do we protect forests? For that, we have to do something in the sector of agriculture. Agriculture, forests, and other land use together are known as AFOLU. Let me use the laser pointer. So let me explain this last statement a little bit better using the diagram in the IPCC Special Report on Climate Change and Land published in 2019, just 2 years ago. And this diagram shows the structure and functioning of managed and unmanaged ecosystems affect local, regional, and land characteristics via biophysical and biogeochemical interactions. Biophysical interactions have to do with light, radiation, something that Professor Nishino just talked about. Sunlight is very important in gearing all the activities of living things. Much of that is bounced back even before reaching the land. But some is absorbed by land and gears all sorts of activities and cause biophysical interactions of heat exchange linked to condensation and evaporation of water, but also sensible heat exchange. That's important because we have to think heat balance in order to think about climate warming. But the more important one is these biogeochemical interactions, which is the exchange of carbon dioxide between atmosphere and land through photosynthesis by plants and release of CO2, either from respiration of living things, especially in agriculture and forestry and other land use sectors, AFOLU. So trees are important in keeping the global balance of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide exchanged by land plants can be represented by this little tree here. Gross photosynthesis is the process to take up carbon dioxide into the tree with photosynthesis. Trees make organic matters, carbon-containing materials, to grow, to make leaves, stems, and roots. Dead part of plants can be decomposed by soil microbes. So the living activity of plants and microbes together release carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. So that's the balance between gross photosynthesis minus ecosystem respiration, known as net flux. Forests actually have positive net flux, meaning absorbing carbon dioxide and storing, which is shown in this diagram. It's modified from the IPCC AR5, Assessment Report 5, published in 2014, but the basic principle hasn't changed in the report released in 2019. Basically, people burn fossil fuel and release 34 gigatons of carbon dioxide each year. In addition, agriculture, forestry, and other land use, AFOLU, activities cause net CO2 release of 5.5 gigatons. So that's big flux. But nature has even bigger flux of absorbing carbon dioxide as gross photosynthesis. Large part of it is released as respiration, but natural ecosystems store some in long-term storage. And this is the net carbon dioxide uptake of 11.7 gigaton. That's the newest estimate. It's a huge number. So little trees together in the forest, especially in the tropics, conduct very, very important service to all living things. Tropical forests occupy 45% of all forests in the world. This is the assessment report from FAO in 2020. But tropical forests punch above their area. Global GPP, gross photosynthetic production by tropical forests, is 40.8 gigaton, which is much larger relative to their area. So tropical forests account for 45% of the global forest, but they conduct 2/3 of global forest photosynthesis. But we are losing tropical forest right now. Just taking a little bit of detour, forests have been working to help, and not necessarily help. Animals and plants don't have any objectives, but forests have shaped the global climate over a long, long time. How long have forests shaped the global climate by uptaking carbon dioxide? Any idea? The answer is for a long, long time, over 400 million years. That's long to think about, but this is the weird forest that used to be the image by the artist. This is the image of the forest that used to be around 400 million years ago. Recent fossil records show that there used to be forests as early as land plants started to evolve. And they have been changing the atmosphere very rapidly. So 400 million years ago in Devonian period, and the next is Carboniferous period, and over this about 100 million years, atmospheric CO2 concentration kept on going down thanks to the action of the ancient forest. And that's what we are burning now. The product of ancient forests buried in the form of coal. Coal beds go back to this long time ago. Well, but forests as we know today are much, much more recent. Dinosaurs went extinct. Many of you like dinosaurs. They went extinct 65 million years ago. The forest as we know today emerged about 55 million years ago. And so as I write here, so that's a forest as we know today. But they continue to do the same important function of balancing the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere. How many of them are doing? The Botanical Garden Conservation International has released a paper. How many tree species are there in the world? The answer is 60,000. How do they know it? Well, we know 1,500 tree species in Japan and so many species in Europe and US, but in the tropics, it's very difficult to know because there are still yet to be discovered species. The estimate is about 40,000 of the 60,000 in the tropics. This requires collaboration of scientists around the world. This is a paper published in 2015, and really the one that came up with that number, 40,000 tree species in the tropics. there are so many authors here behind, but by collaboration, they could create a pan-tropical tree inventory database from closed canopy forest consisting of so many trees belonging to 11,300 species, but the rest they estimated with statistical procedure. And that kind of collaboration is possible because there is a collaborative network of forest plots around the world, each consisting 4 to 150 hectares. And there are 72 forest sites in 27 countries, counting over 7 million trees of 12,000 species. But there is a large part of tropical areas that still haven't had any of such monitoring plots, including Madagascar. I'd like you to focus on this one because I will zoom into Madagascar now. Because there is no such inventory in Madagascar, we decided to look into the unique ecosystem of Madagascar forest. And we focused on a dry forest, and this is our survey team, starting in 2019. Madagascar has 3 types of forest: rainforest, dry spiny thickets, and dry forest, which has some deciduous trees and some evergreen trees. We have been working at Ankara-Fantsika National Park in northwestern dry forest, which is full of many interesting animals: lemurs, chameleons, insects. And so we thought, okay, it's time to study plants. So we created 300 meter by 500 meter forest monitoring plots, and we mapped every tree over 5 centimeter in diameter between July 2019 and December 2020. So mapping involves every tree gets a little metal tag of unique number, and we mark exactly where we measure the diameter. And our plan is to go back in 5 years to see how they are growing and how much carbon dioxide this forest is absorbing, in addition to supporting biodiversity. Unfortunately, this wonderful forest is becoming increasingly isolated because forests in surrounding area are rapidly lost. Water degrading forest, which also has a global implication, slash and burn for maize cropping, charcoal making for sales, and also cattle grazing. All of these involve fire. So fire spreading around, these are the hot spots that you can detect from satellite. And some of that fire has jumped inside the park. Indeed, in 2019, it was so bad that Madagascar government sent military to patrol and try to contain fire. And Madagascar is not alone. This is FAO statistics showing how bad the deforestation is in South America and Africa. Each bar is for 10 years, 1990 to 2000, 2000 to 2010, 2010 to 2020. In Africa, this bar going down means deforestation. It's getting worse. So one mechanism to counter this kind of forest loss is REDD. REDD, reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. And this is an international scheme in which developed countries pay developing countries for not cutting forests, which should be verified by monitoring and reporting. It was proposed in the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change, UNFCCC, in 2005, and the plus was added in 2011, which include forest conservation, sustainable management of forest, and enhancement of forest carbon stocks. So I thought, in order to protect the wonderful biodiverse, forest in Madagascar, maybe we can look into the REDD Plus scheme. So here is my ongoing project with support from JST, AXIS program, to address sustainable development goals. And this feasibility study is a title of Assessment of Ecosystem Servicing Western Dry Forest in Madagascar and Potential for Sustainable Development with REDD Plus. Okay, so we have 3 work packages: assessment of multiple forest ecosystem services, including biodiversity conservation and carbon stock, and understanding deforestation drivers. And then let's do something about it with a combination of scientific knowledge base, private sector technology, and private sector funding, i.e. working together. SDG goal number 17. So I hope that you learned something about SDGs, and it's important to protect forests to combat climate action, but for that we have to work together and also address all these different sustainable development goals. Thank you very much for listening.